Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo.
Hello and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I meant to do an episode all about dry January when dry January was happening, but I didn't get a chance to. But either way, what I wanted to discuss is kind of what to do after the fact anyways. So first things first, if you don't know what dry January is, it's when most people start the new year off without drinking any alcohol. And obviously, without consuming excessive amount of alcohol, you'll probably start thinking more clearly. You'll eliminate additional added calories. If you're someone who tends to overeat as a response to drinking, because you kind of lose your inhibition. In general, I'm hoping that most of you learned a lot about yourself and your body through participating in dry January. And so you're not drinking alcohol. And I think the whole purpose to it is to help you recognize that you don't really need it. Although you can incorporate it as a social thing, as a way to maybe at the end of the night, kind of, have a glass of wine because it's super relaxing, or a way to connect with others. I think that the lesson there, hopefully for you, was recognizing that you can actually have a good time without alcohol being involved. You can kind of wind down to the end of the night by having, some tea. And I'm sure that you've learned a lot about yourself. And, if you're not using alcohol, it's very similar to food, right? We use food as a way to cope with our emotions and our feelings. And if we do that too much, then we're not actually getting to the root of what we're feeling. So very often when I work with people and I help them heal the relationship with food and manage their binging and manage their emotional eating, they actually will say to me that they've been feeling more anxious. And that's very normal, right? If we take away the thing that you utilize to cope, then you're no longer hiding behind it, right? I very often, one story I can share with you is that back in the day, 3 or 4 years ago, I was an avid exerciser, and exercise was my way to cope with my stress. And you could argue that that's very healthy, but it can easily become unhealthy. And what's also not healthy is if that's your only way to cope, and then you can't get an exercise or a workout in, now you're stressing about it. That's not healthy either, right? So it's important to have many things in your arsenal to help manage your stress or your anger or your fatigue or whatever it is that kind of gets you down and either forces you to maybe turn to food or some self-destructive behaviors or drinking alcohol. We want to make sure that the root behind your choices are just that, choices. And so one of my clients, actually a few of my clients that I work with, we discuss. Let me backtrack. I would have said one of my clients or a few of my clients. Most of my clients that I work with, we talk about stress management techniques because of the fact that they're constantly pouring into others, devoting a lot of their time, effort, and energy into their work, into their relationships, into, helping their children, whatever it is. At the end of the day, they are conked out. They have zero energy left. And often they're so stressed and so tense that they feel that they need a drink. They absolutely feel like they need a drink. And that's where we have to have that conversation, is if you're getting to that level, like what can we put in place to make you not be so stressed where you feel like you need a drink? The difference between needing a drink and wanting a drink is significantly different, right? It's the difference between choosing to sit down and have a piece of cake versus impulsively having a piece of cake just because it's there and you just kind of get caught up in it. Two very different feelings. So what I teach my clients is how to be in charge of their food choices so they're no longer feeling like they're constantly acting on impulse and then sitting in something that's like, how did I even get here? So the same thing goes in the way in which we want to consume alcohol. Now, I'm aware that for some of you, you might be struggling with, think that there there's a part of you that needs to continue dry January and go to dry February. And maybe alcohol is not present in your life. Maybe through this experience, you recognize that there's really no good that comes from it. Maybe you do struggle with knowing how to have just one glass or just, 2 drinks, and maybe that you really struggle with that. And if that's the case, then I strongly advise going to AA meetings. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you feel like, and if you are being honest with yourself and feeling that you're struggling with alcoholism, definitely get help. But if you're feeling like you're teetering on it, you can still go to AA and learn from other people and really just talk to them about when did they recognize it was a problem, and maybe hearing from somebody who's been there before will help you recognize and identify if you are in fact someone that maybe needs to just refrain from it in general, or if you're someone who's able to you kind of have to figure out, how much you're going to have, when you're going to have it, so you can feel in charge of your alcohol consumption as well. Okay, so just how you might decide with your food choices that you allow for, 2 cookies every day, let's say, because if you don't have it, you end up over consuming on the weekend, then maybe the same goes with your alcohol. Maybe you actually allow for a glass of wine every day, because when you have this repeated exposure and you allow yourself to have something, and you allow yourself to have a glass of wine with dinner each night, then you'll probably find that you don't actually want the wine with dinner each night. You're okay with that. But then there's the other side of it. And maybe for you, your 1 glass often goes to 2 glasses. And so maybe your rule with yourself is you allow yourself to have, 2 drinks on a Friday night and 2 drinks on a Saturday night, and you cap it at that. So there's many reasons behind why you would want to kind of set these limits. It could be the way that it affects your mental health. It could be a way that it affects your sleep. I've talked about this on other podcasts before about alcohol. When you overconsume alcohol, you never get to REM. So you might feel like you had like you're in this deep sleep, and you wake up and you don't feel rested. Maybe the alcohol consumption, the difference between 2 glasses on a Friday and 3 glasses on a Friday is Saturday you wake up, and with the 2, you often are able to kind of motivate yourself, get your workout in if that was planned for you. But if you don't, then you're like, I'm skipping my workout. Then you skip your workout, and then maybe you don't eat the best, because when you tend to eat better when you work out, and it's all a cycle. And so what I'll remind you of today is that one choice is never one choice. And so you always want to really think through kind of what your decisions are, what your choices are, what your behaviors are, because they're often going to affect other areas and other aspects in your life. So if you did dry January, there's what I want you to do. Everything we just talked about. I want you to assess what worked well for you. What kind of observations did you learn about yourself? Did you pick up, some other kind of stress management techniques at the end of the night instead of you having that nightcap? Maybe you did some stretching, some deep breathing, meditation, yoga, drink some tea, just kind of sat with your thoughts. Maybe you journaled a ton, whatever it is. If you learned anything from this, please bring that into February. Okay? Please bring it into February. Now, what I don't want you to do, it's very similar to a diet. When someone goes on a restrictive diet, they might, negate all of these foods. Maybe they heard gluten was bad for them. They heard dairy was bad for them. They heard soy was bad for them. Honestly, guys, if you did Whole30, chances are you did, because most people start their New Year's with that. That doesn't now mean that you go back to all your old eating patterns and you just kind of just like go back and you reintroduce all of them really, really quickly, because then you didn't really learn anything, right? So, but maybe when you did Whole30, you recognize, I think I actually do have like a gluten sensitivity. So maybe you limit your gluten, but you realize, I am totally fine with dairy. I can consume dairy, soy, there's no issue. So you keep those in and you learn something and you apply it. But you don't go, where you eliminate everything and then you put it all back in there and it's almost like you learned nothing in the month of January. Then your dry January was just a waste of time. So if you did struggle where you notice that you were having like 2 to 3 drinks a night because maybe your pours of wine were a little bit heavier than that 5-ounce serving, right? And so you're starting to recognize like, wow, I was drinking a lot. There really were no boundaries. It was kind of just like I would have a couple drinks at night with dinner. On the weekends, I'd have a whole bottle of wine, whatever it was. Now take a look at that and really recognize you don't need it. Obviously, you don't need it. Now, if you want it, how much do you want? Take what you need, take what you want, and what are your other goals, right? So if you have a weight management goal, then we know that that's a lot where there's a lot of excess calories can come from alcohol consumption, or like I said before, it could trigger you into overeating because you lose all inhibition. So really align yourself with that. If it makes you feel like hungover and dehydrated, alcohol is super dehydrating. So if you feel like you always have a headache and you're just not, your best when you drink and you feel that, listen to that. Right? That doesn't mean you don't have to continue, dry February, dry March, and just never drink again. Maybe that means that you know that your maximum is 2, that you're good with 2. And maybe for some of you it's 1, right? Maybe for some of you it's 3, but for most women, 1 drink an hour is pretty standard in what we're able to tolerate. And for men, it's 2 drinks in an hour. Obviously, it all goes based off of body size and all that stuff. But in general, that's something that we want to go by. Is that what your body's able to digest over time? Okay. So if you feel like you need help and you've identified that and you were able to go a whole month sober, proud of you. Really, really proud of you. Definitely reach out to a local AA meeting and get your support. For those of you who are listening to this and we're doing it more for like a social aspect or just a health aspect or whatever it is, take what you've learned and apply that and find the middle ground, right? We do not want to keep doing this all in, all out, all or nothing mindset. It really just gets you zero, it gets you nowhere, right? So what did you learn? What will you apply? How will you treat your relationship with alcohol differently going into February? All right, guys, I hope you found this helpful. If you did, take a screenshot of this episode, share it on your story, tag me at tips_with_Tony with an I or the Tips with Tony podcast. If you're not already subscribed to the podcast, definitely hit that subscribe button. Feel free to send me an email, tipswithtony@gmail.com with your takeaways, or if you have any suggestions for future episodes. I'm always open to listening and hearing what it is that you want to learn, and I'd be more than happy to provide an episode about it. Or maybe there's already one out there, and I can just send you the link for that. All right, guys, that is it for me today. As always, I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.